Welcome to Mr. Kellen's Stories, everyone. If you love thrilling stories, heartwarming lessons, and mind-blowing twists, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you captivating tales packed with drama, suspense, and deep emotion stories that make you think, feel, and see the world differently. Hit that like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an incredible story. Let's embark on this journey together, one story at a time. Mick Jorden had everything a man could ever want, or so it seemed. He was a self-made millionaire, a man who had built his empire from nothing but sheer determination and hard work. Unlike those who inherited their wealth, Mick knew what it meant to struggle. He had seen the darkest nights, lived through the harshest realities, and fought tooth and nail for every bit of success he now had. Born to a working-class family, Mick had spent his early years watching his father labor in a dusty auto repair shop. The smell of motor oil, the sound of clanking tools, and the sight of his father's grease-stained hands were etched into his memory. It was in that small, dimly lit garage that he learned the value of hard work. His father had always told him, "Success isn't given, son. It's earned. And once you have it, you fight to keep it." And Mick had fought. He had worked day and night, sacrificing sleep, comfort, and even friendships to build his dream. He took risks when others played it safe. He endured failures when others would have quit. And now he stood tall as the owner of a billion-dollar tech company, a man whose name was synonymous with power and influence. But despite all the money, the mansions, and the luxury cars parked in his expansive driveway, there was only one thing Mick truly considered his greatest success: his wife, Sophia. She was everything he had ever dreamed of in a woman: beautiful, intelligent, and charming. The moment he laid eyes on her, he knew she was the one. Unlike the superficial women who were drawn to his wealth, Sophia had met him when he was still building his empire. She had seen him at his lowest, wiped his tears when he felt like giving up, and encouraged him when the world seemed against him. They had been inseparable ever since. Mick loved her deeply, completely. He adored the way she laughed, how her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dreams, and the warmth of her presence beside him. He cherished the way she would run her fingers through his hair after a long day, whispering, "You're doing great, my love." She was his home, his safe place, his everything. Together, they lived in a breathtaking mansion with high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the shimmering city lights. The house was more than just bricks and walls. It was their sanctuary, a place filled with love, laughter, and memories. Every morning, Mick would wake up to the soft sunlight streaming through their bedroom window. He would roll over, watching Sophia sleep peacefully beside him. Her chest rose and fell in a gentle rhythm, her lips slightly parted, and her golden brown curls spilled over the pillow. She looked so serene, so innocent. He would reach over, tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear, and whisper, "I love you." And every morning she would stir slightly, smile sleepily, and mumble, "I love you too." Mick lived for those moments. Their love was the kind that others envied. They were the power couple everyone talked about. At charity galas, they arrived hand in hand, looking like they had stepped out of a fairy tale. At business events, Sophia stood proudly beside Mick, introducing herself as his wife with a dazzling smile. Their friends often told Mick how lucky he was, and he believed them. To him, Sophia was perfection. She was his soulmate, his best friend, the woman he had vowed to love and cherish forever. But perfection is often an illusion. In the midst of his happiness, Mick failed to see the cracks forming beneath the surface. He didn't notice the small changes at first. The way Sophia's laughter didn't reach her eyes like it used to. The way she clung to her phone a little too tightly. The way she suddenly started coming home later than usual, her perfume mixed with an unfamiliar scent. Mick never questioned it. Why would he? He trusted her. He had spent years building a love so strong, so unshakable, that the thought of betrayal never even crossed his mind. But trust is a fragile thing, and sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who break us the hardest. One evening, as Mick sat in his home office reviewing financial reports, he glanced up at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Sophia still wasn't home. She had told him she was meeting some friends for dinner. She had kissed him on the cheek before leaving, flashing him that same radiant smile that had stolen his heart years ago. He had smiled back, told her to have fun, and gone about his evening. But now, as he sat alone in the dimly lit room, something felt off. A strange feeling settled in his chest, one he couldn't quite explain. Had she ever stayed out this late before? Maybe she was just caught up in conversation. Maybe she lost track of time. He reached for his phone and typed a quick message. "Hey, sweetheart. Just checking in. Everything okay?" The message was delivered, but there was no reply. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Mick tried to shake off the unease creeping up his spine. "She's fine. Stop overthinking." Yet no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. And deep down, his heart whispered a terrifying truth. His perfect life was about to shatter. Mick had always been a man who trusted easily, especially when it came to Sophia. For years, he had believed in the strength of their love, in the vows they had exchanged, in the unbreakable bond they had built. But lately, something was different. The change had been slow at first, almost unnoticeable. Small things that, on their own, wouldn't mean much. A missed kiss in the morning, a delayed response to his messages, a distracted gaze when he spoke. Mick told himself it was nothing. She's just stressed. Work has been tough. Maybe she's going through something. But as the weeks passed, the little things grew into something bigger, something unsettling. Sophia was no longer the woman who curled up beside him on the couch, laughing at old movies. She no longer reached for his hand when they walked together. Their late-night talks, once filled with deep conversations and whispered dreams, had faded into silence. And then there was her phone. Mick had never paid much attention to it before. He wasn't the kind of man to invade his wife's privacy. He believed in trust, in respect, in giving space. But now he couldn't ignore how much she clung to that device, as if it held something more important than him. It was always in her hand, always face down when she placed it on the table, always met with a quick swipe and a forced smile when a notification popped up. "Mick, it's just work," she had said once when she caught him glancing at her screen. "You know how demanding clients can be." He had nodded, smiled, pushed down the nagging feeling in his chest. But doubt had already begun to plant its seed. Then came the nights she stayed out late. At first, she had reasonable explanations. A dinner with friends, a last-minute meeting, a spontaneous shopping trip. But her excuses were never detailed, never accompanied by the warmth and excitement she used to have when she shared her day with him. And then there were the lies. One evening, she told him she was meeting her friend Emma for dinner. Something in her voice felt off, but Mick didn't question it. He trusted her. He kissed her forehead and told her to have fun. But later that night, as he scrolled through his social media feed, he saw something that made his stomach twist. Emma had posted a picture, cozy in her pajamas, watching a movie at home. She hadn't been out with Sophia. Mick felt the first real stab of suspicion that night. But even then, he refused to believe it, because believing it meant accepting that the woman he loved, the woman he had given his entire heart to, was hiding something from him. He convinced himself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe she had changed plans. Maybe Emma had gotten home early. Maybe he was just overthinking. But deep inside, his heart knew better. Something was wrong. Days turned into weeks, and Mick tried to bury his suspicions beneath logic. Until one night, when the truth shattered the illusion he had clung to for so long. Sophia had just come home late. Again. She barely spoke to him before heading straight to the shower. Mick sat on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his hair. His mind was restless, his heart uneasy. He looked toward the bathroom, hearing the faint sound of water running, and then his eyes landed on her phone. It was there on the nightstand, unlocked. For the first time in his life, Mick felt the overwhelming urge to look. His hands trembled as he reached for it. He told himself he was just checking, that he wasn't breaking her trust. He was protecting his own heart. With a deep breath, he opened her messages. And then he saw it. A thread of messages from a number he didn't recognize. "I miss you already. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." Mick's entire world tilted, his vision blurred, his heart pounded against his ribs, each beat heavier than the last. His fingers hovered over the screen, scrolling through the messages, reading words that burned like acid in his chest, words of longing, of passion, of a secret life his wife had been living behind his back. He felt sick. His breathing turned shallow. His hands shook. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was betrayal. His wife, the woman he had cherished, trusted, and loved more than anything, was having an affair. And in that moment, something inside Mick broke. The world he had built with her, the life he thought was perfect, had just crumbled into dust. Mick sat frozen on the edge of the bed, Sophia's phone still in his trembling hands. His heart pounded so violently that it felt like it might burst through his ribs. His breath came in shallow gasps as he reread the words on the screen. "I miss you already. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." Each sentence was a knife, plunging deeper into his chest. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a cruel joke, a wrong number, anything but the truth his heart already knew. Mick's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white. 1,000 emotions crashed over him at once: anger, disbelief, heartbreak, humiliation. He had given this woman everything, everything. The mansion they lived in, the luxury cars in the garage, the designer clothes in her closet. He had worked himself to the bone to give her the life she deserved. And in return, she had given her heart to someone else. He wanted to scream. He wanted to throw the phone across the room, smash it into 1,000 pieces, just like she had shattered his trust. He wanted to barge into the bathroom, rip the truth from her lips, make her look him in the eye and confess. But Mick Jorden wasn't just a man of emotions. He was a man of calculation. He had built his empire with patience, intelligence, and strategy. He had spent years learning how to outthink his competitors, how to see 3 steps ahead of everyone else. And now he would use that same strategy to uncover the full truth. This wasn't just about catching Sophia in the act. This was about justice. This was about taking back control. Mick put the phone back exactly as he had found it, his movements slow and deliberate. He forced himself to breathe, forced his hands to stop shaking. The sound of the shower still ran in the background, the water crashing against the tiles, drowning out the chaos inside his head. He had to act normal. He had to pretend he hadn't just seen the messages that had destroyed his world. Mick stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights below. Everything looked so peaceful out there, so calm, so unlike the storm raging inside him. Sophia stepped out of the bathroom a few minutes later, wrapped in a towel, her damp curls sticking to her shoulders. She smiled at him, a smile that used to feel like home. But now, all Mick could see was a stranger. "Hey, babe," she said, walking toward him, placing a soft kiss on his cheek. "You okay? You look a little tense." Mick forced a chuckle, pretending to stretch. "Just a long day at work." Nothing to worry about. He felt sick even saying the words, because there was everything to worry about. She smiled again, completely unaware that the man standing in front of her was no longer the trusting husband she had once deceived. Mick had changed in that moment. The man she had fooled, the man she thought she could keep lying to, he was gone. What remained was a man with a plan. The next morning, Mick wasted no time. He made a few calls and set up a meeting with the best private investigator in the city. If Sophia was truly being unfaithful, Mick needed proof, hard evidence, undeniable facts, because when the time came, when he finally confronted her, he wanted to see her squirm under the weight of her own lies. By afternoon, he sat across from a sharp-eyed man named Daniel Cross, a seasoned investigator known for uncovering secrets most people thought were buried forever. Daniel leaned back in his chair, hands clasped. "You suspect your wife is having an affair?" Mick's jaw clenched. "I don't just suspect it, I know." He slid a piece of paper across the desk, the phone number from Sophia's texts. Daniel studied it for a moment before nodding. "Give me a few days. If there's something to find, I'll find it." Mick shook his hand, sealing the deal. For the first time in 24 hours, he felt a small sense of control. But that control wouldn't last long, because what Daniel uncovered in the following days would shatter Mick completely. 3 days later, Mick received a call. "We need to meet. I have something you need to see." Mick's heart pounded in his chest. He drove to Daniel's office, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles ached. When he arrived, Daniel was already waiting for him, a thick folder sitting on his desk. The investigator sighed, pushing the folder toward Mick. "I don't sugarcoat things, Mr. Jorden. You might want to brace yourself." Mick swallowed hard and opened the file. Inside were photos of Sophia. With him, another man. A man Mick had never seen before, captured in intimate moments, holding her, kissing her, whispering into her ear as she smiled like she was in love. Mick's stomach churned. His vision blurred. Photo after photo, the evidence piled up. There were receipts, hotel bookings, expensive dinners, secret weekend getaways. There were timestamps, proving that on the night she had claimed to be with friends, she had really been in his arms. Mick felt the ground beneath him collapse. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a double life. Sophia wasn't just cheating. She had built an entire relationship behind his back. And worst of all, she had never looked happier. Mick shut the folder, his hands gripping the edges so tightly it nearly tore. His jaw clenched, his pulse thundered. This wasn't just a broken marriage, this was war. And Mick Jorden, he wasn't about to lose. Mick sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The folder containing the investigator's findings lay open on the passenger seat. The pages inside were filled with undeniable proof. Photos, videos, receipts, and records of the affair. He had suspected it, he had known, but knowing and seeing were two very different things. The photos were seared into his mind. Sophia, his wife, the woman he had loved, trusted, and sacrificed so much for, wrapped in another man's arms, the way she looked at him, the way she smiled. It was a look she hadn't given Mick in years, and the worst part, he was paying for it. His wealth, his hard-earned success, the fortune he had built from nothing, it was funding their affair. The investigator had traced restaurant bills, hotel stays, designer gifts, all charged to their joint account. Every romantic dinner, every secret getaway, every luxurious moment she spent with him was bought with Mick's money. And who was this man? Young, handsome, but nowhere near Mick's level. A struggling musician, barely making ends meet. A man who had nothing except for Sophia's love. Mick had given her the world, and still she had chosen someone else. His stomach churned with rage. He could have confronted her right then and there. He could have stormed into their mansion, thrown the evidence in her face, and demanded answers. But Mick Jorden was not a man of impulse. He was a man of strategy. And this situation, this required something far greater than simple confrontation. This required justice, not just for himself, for every person who had ever been used, deceived, and discarded. Mick took a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly. He knew how typical revenge stories played out. The betrayed husband exposes the affair. The marriage ends in a messy divorce. The cheater moves on, and life continues as if nothing happened. But Mick wanted something more. He didn't just want to punish Sophia, he wanted to teach her a lesson she would never forget. And not just her, he wanted society to watch, because people like Sophia existed everywhere. Women and men who took advantage of love, who saw loyalty as weakness, who believed they could betray the ones who cared for them without consequence. Mick wasn't going to let that happen. He was going to make an example out of her. He picked up his phone and dialed Daniel Cross, the investigator. "I need you for one more job," Mick said, his voice calm but firm. There was a brief pause, then Daniel spoke. "I had a feeling you'd say that," he said. "What do you have in mind?" Mick stared out at the city skyline, his mind racing with possibilities. And then, slowly, a plan began to form. A plan that would shake Sophia's world to its core. A plan that would show everyone what happens when you betray the wrong man. Mick wasn't going to destroy her. He was going to let her destroy herself. For the next 2 weeks, Mick played his part perfectly. He acted normal. He kissed Sophia good morning. He held her at night. He took her out to expensive dinners, bought her gifts, and made her feel like nothing had changed. But behind the scenes, everything was changing. He quietly separated their finances, moving his personal wealth into private accounts she couldn't access. He transferred ownership of key assets, cars, properties, investments, out of her name, and he started documenting everything, every lie she told, every night she came home late, every excuse she gave for her girls' nights and spa weekends. He wasn't just preparing for a confrontation. He was preparing for her downfall. Meanwhile, Daniel was still tracking Sophia's movements. And what they discovered? It was worse than Mick had imagined. Not only was Sophia using his money to fund her affair, she was planning to leave him. One night, Daniel sent Mick an audio recording. It was Sophia talking to him. "I can't do this much longer," she whispered. "Mick is so clueless, but I don't want to risk anything. Once I have enough, I'll leave and we'll start fresh." Mick clenched his jaw. She wasn't just cheating, she was waiting for the right moment to walk away, to leave him after draining every last benefit from their marriage. But Mick wasn't going to wait. He was going to act first. The night of Sophia's birthday, Mick arranged an extravagant celebration, a luxury ballroom, hundreds of guests, live music, champagne flowing like water. Sophia arrived in a designer gown, a gown Mick had bought. She smiled, basking in the attention, believing this night was about her. She had no idea what was coming. Halfway through the evening, Mick took the stage. "Tonight," he began, voice smooth and confident, "I want to honor my beautiful wife, Sophia." Applause filled the room. Sophia beamed. "But before I do," Mick continued, "I have a little surprise." The lights dimmed. A projector flickered on. And then the affair was exposed. Photos flashed across the screen. Sophia and him, in hotels, in restaurants, in each other's arms. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Sophia's face drained of color. And then, the final blow. The audio recording played. Her own words filled the silent room. "Once I have enough, I'll leave and we'll start fresh." Silence, then whispers, then chaos. Sophia screamed. She turned to Mick, her eyes wide with panic. "Mick, I—" But Mick simply smiled. He leaned into the microphone. "Happy birthday, darling." And with that, he walked away. Sophia lost everything, the luxury, the wealth, the status. The world saw her for what she was, a liar, a user, a fraud, and Mick, he walked away stronger. He had given his heart to someone who never deserved it, but in the end, he won. And the world, they watched, they learned, and they understood. Betrayal comes with consequences. Mick Jorden had spent years building his empire, brick by brick, through intelligence, patience, and unshakable control. He wasn't about to let rage dictate his next move. Sophia had betrayed him, but he wouldn't stoop to screaming, crying, or begging for explanations. She wasn't worth his anger. Instead, he would make her feel every ounce of what she had done, not just in this moment, but for the rest of her life. She would regret this, not because he would destroy her, because he would leave her with nothing. Mick knew one undeniable fact. Sophia loved wealth more than she loved him. And if she thought she could betray him while still enjoying the luxuries he provided, she was in for a rude awakening. He wasted no time. The very next morning he called his legal team, a group of elite attorneys who had protected his fortune for years. "I need everything under my name alone," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The mansion, the cars, the investments. I want airtight legal documents ensuring Sophia has no access to a single cent of my wealth." His lawyers didn't ask questions. Within days, every joint asset had been transferred. Bank accounts, separated, credit cards, cancelled, the mansion, legally his and his alone. Sophia wouldn't suspect a thing, not yet. She would still have access to her personal spending accounts, but those were a drop in the ocean compared to the fortune Mick controlled. The real loss would come later, but Mick didn't just want to take from her. He wanted to turn this pain into something bigger, something meaningful. He called his financial advisor and instructed him to set up a new charity fund. A fund dedicated to people who had suffered from betrayal, deception, and heartbreak. The goal? To help people rebuild their lives. Victims of cheating spouses, people who had lost everything due to dishonest partners, individuals struggling to recover from broken trust. Mick secretly poured millions into this fund. Sophia had stolen his trust. Now he would use that very betrayal to restore others. It was poetic justice, and when the time came, the world would know exactly where that money had come from. With the financial side secured, Mick turned his attention to the confrontation, but he wouldn't do it privately. No, Sophia had humiliated him in secret. He would expose her in public, and what better setting than a lavish event, filled with the very people who believed their marriage was perfect. Mick began planning a grand party, a charity gala under the pretense of celebrating their anniversary. Sophia, oblivious to what was coming, was delighted. "This is going to be the event of the year," she gushed, kissing Mick's cheek. "I love you so much for doing this." Mick forced a smile. If only she knew. The stage was set. The guests were invited. The world would witness her downfall. Mick wasn't done yet. As the gala neared, he arranged for one final symbolic act of justice. A letter, a handwritten note addressed to Sophia, one she wouldn't receive until after the confrontation. Inside, he detailed everything, the lies, the pain, the moment he found out, but most importantly, he ended with one final truth. "I loved you, Sophia, but love is not blindness. You taught me that trust is a gift, not a guarantee, and now you will live with the consequences of breaking it." It wasn't revenge. It was justice, and she would never forget it. The evening before the gala, Mick sat in his study, staring at the city skyline. For the first time in weeks, he felt at peace. Tomorrow the world would know the truth. Tomorrow Sophia would realize the depth of her betrayal. And tomorrow, Mick Jorden would finally be free. Mick Jorden stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the cuffs of his custom-tailored suit. His expression was calm, his movements precise, but inside his heart pounded with the weight of what was to come. Tonight was the night he would finally confront Sophia, not with anger, not with shouting, not with tears, but with the truth, a truth she would have no choice but to face. He took a deep breath, slipping the envelope into his jacket pocket. The evidence was inside: photographs, receipts, proof of her affair, proof of her betrayal. He had planned every second of tonight to perfection. There would be no mistakes. Tonight, Sophia would answer for what she had done. The restaurant was one of their favorites, an elegant candlelit setting where they had celebrated anniversaries, milestones, and victories. Sophia had always loved this place, and tonight she arrived looking as stunning as ever. She wore a sleek black dress that hugged her figure, her hair cascading over her shoulders in soft waves. A delicate diamond necklace, a gift from Mick, glittered at her throat. If he hadn't known the truth, he might have thought she was the perfect wife. But he did know. And the illusion? It was already shattered. Sophia smiled as she approached the table. "This is such a surprise," she said, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "A romantic dinner, just the two of us?" Mick smiled back, playing his role flawlessly. "I wanted to do something special for you." He gestured for her to sit, pouring them both a glass of rich red wine. Sophia sipped, sighing in contentment. "You always know how to spoil me." Mick chuckled, swirling the wine in his glass. Oh, if only she knew. They talked about the usual things: her day, the upcoming charity gala, their friends. Mick listened, nodding, playing the devoted husband. But the entire time, his fingers brushed against the envelope in his pocket, waiting. Timing was everything. When the main course arrived, Mick set his utensils down and reached into his jacket. Sophia didn't notice at first. She was too busy admiring her reflection in the wine glass. Then he placed the envelope in front of her. "Here," he said, his voice deceptively gentle. "A little something for you." Sophia raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "What's this?" "Go ahead," Mick said, leaning back in his chair. "Open it." She hesitated, sensing something unusual in his tone. But curiosity won over, and she slid a manicured fingernail under the flap, pulling out the contents. As she flipped through the photographs, her face drained of color. Hotel lobbies, intimate dinners, private embraces, the undeniable proof of her betrayal. She swallowed hard. "Mick, He raised a hand, silencing her. His expression was unreadable. "No need," he said quietly. "I already know everything." The weight of his words hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Sophia's hands trembled. This isn't what it looks like." Mick let out a cold, humorless chuckle. "Is that so?" He leaned forward. "Because it looks like my wife, the woman I trusted, has been sneaking around with another man behind my back." Sophia's breathing was shaky, her eyes darting around the restaurant as if searching for an escape. "Mick, please, let me explain." He tilted his head, feigning curiosity. "Go ahead," he said. "I'd love to hear it." She opened her mouth, but no words came. What could she possibly say? That she didn't mean it? That it was a mistake? The evidence was right there, staring her in the face. For the first time, she had no excuses. Tears welled in her eyes. "Mick, I love you." Mick laughed softly, shaking his head. "Love." He gestured to the photos. "Is that what love looks like to you?" She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "This doesn't have to change us," she whispered. "We can move past this." Mick's jaw tightened. "Move past this," he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "You spent months lying to me, sneaking around, using my money to fund your affair. And now you want me to pretend it didn't happen?" She shook her head. "No, You planned to leave me," Mick cut in. "When you had drained me of everything, when you thought I wouldn't suspect a thing, you were going to walk away." Sophia paled. He knew. He knew everything. Mick exhaled slowly, staring at the woman he had once cherished. "Tell me, Sophia, when did I stop being enough for you?" She pressed her lips together, fresh tears slipping down her cheeks. "It wasn't like that." Mick shook his head. "It was exactly like that." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The restaurant buzzed around them, couples laughing, glasses clinking, life going on as if nothing had changed. But for them, everything had changed. Mick pushed his chair back, standing up. Sophia's eyes widened. "Mick, wait, please." He pulled out his wallet, took a few $100 bills, and placed them on the table. "This should cover dinner." Then he looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman he had once adored, the woman who had betrayed him in the most heartless way possible, and he felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no love, just emptiness. He leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "You made your choice, Sophia. Now live with it." And with that, Mick turned and walked out of the restaurant. He didn't look back, not once, and neither did she. The restaurant was silent except for the soft clinking of glasses and the murmur of hushed conversations. Yet for Mick Jorden and Sophia, the world had narrowed down to the small, candle-lit table between them. Sophia's hands trembled as she clutched the envelope Mick had just handed her. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs, her breath shaky as she hesitated to open it. She had expected anger. She had expected rage. She had expected divorce papers. But what she found inside was something far worse. Her fingers traced over the printed words, her eyes widening in disbelief. This isn't what I think it is it?" she whispered. Mick, calm and composed, simply nodded. "Oh, it is." Sophia swallowed, blinking rapidly as her vision blurred with tears. You donated it?" Her voice cracked. "Half of our money? Our entire wealth?" Mick leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His expression was unreadable, his voice eerily steady. "Not ours," he corrected. "Mine. And yes, I donated it." Sophia's lips parted, but no words came. It was all sinking in now, the gravity of what he had done, the weight of the consequences she had unknowingly set into motion. The betrayal hadn't just cost her Mick's love, it had cost her everything. Sophia's breath hitched as she glanced over the documents again. Her mind raced, desperate to make sense of what was happening. He had given away millions, not to friends, not to business partners, not even to his family, but to charities. Charities dedicated to helping those who had suffered betrayal, women left penniless by cheating husbands, men abandoned and broken by the partners they trusted, children forced into hardship because of selfish, reckless decisions. Sophia's stomach twisted painfully. "This is some kind of joke," she muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're trying to scare me." Mick tilted his head slightly. "Am I?" He gestured toward the papers still clutched in her shaking hands. "Read the signatures, Sophia. Read the bank confirmations. It's done." Her breathing grew ragged as she frantically flipped through the pages. Her worst fear was confirmed. It wasn't a bluff. It wasn't a trick. It was real. The money was gone. Sophia let out a sharp, shaky breath, looking up at Mick with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Why?" she choked out. "Why would you do this?" Mick studied her for a moment before answering. "Because I don't believe in revenge," he said simply, "but I do believe in justice." Sophia's face crumpled. "Mick, please." She reached across the table, trying to grab his hand. "We can fix this. We can—" He pulled away before she could touch him. "There is no we anymore, Sophia," he said firmly. "You made sure of that." Tears streamed down her face. "But I love you." Mick let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Love?" He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You call this love?" Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but Mick wasn't finished. "Love is loyalty," he said. "Love is respect. Love is honesty." His eyes darkened. You showed me none of that. Sophia's shoulders shook as sobs racked her body. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. Mick held up a hand, cutting her off. Save it. For the first time, his voice carried a trace of emotion. Not anger, not hatred, just disappointment. I don't need your explanation, Sophia, he continued. I don't need your excuses. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I needed a wife who loved me, and instead, I got you. Sophia's sobs grew louder, drawing the attention of nearby diners. But Mick remained unaffected. She had expected a fight. She had expected him to throw the divorce papers at her, scream at her, call her every name in the book. She had been prepared for rage. But this cold, calculated indifference, this was worse, because it meant that Mick didn't just want to hurt her, he wanted to erase her, to act as if she had never existed. She wiped at her tears, her voice breaking. Mick, please. I don't want to lose you. He simply stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. Then, with a slow shake of his head, he delivered the final blow. You already did. Mick pushed his chair back and stood, adjusting his suit jacket with precision. Sophia scrambled to her feet. Wait, where are you going? He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Home. Sophia's face twisted in agony. Take me with you, we can... No. The single word sent a fresh wave of despair through her. Mick! He reached into his wallet, pulled out a few $100 bills and placed them on the table. This should cover dinner! Sophia's knees nearly buckled. This was it. As Mick turned to leave, she called out to him one last time. Please, she cried. I'll do anything, just don't leave me like this. Mick paused at the restaurant entrance. For a split second she thought he might reconsider. But then, without looking back, he uttered his final words to her. I hope you learn from this, Sophia. His voice was quiet yet firm. Because I sure as hell did. And then he walked away, out of the restaurant, out of her life, forever. Sophia collapsed into her seat, her sobs echoing in the dimly lit restaurant. She had everything. A life of luxury, a devoted husband, a love that could have lasted a lifetime. And now, she had nothing. Just a pile of photographs, a hollow heart, and the agonizing realization that she had destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to her. Mick was gone, and he was never coming back. Sophia sat in the dimly lit, run-down apartment, her fingers gripping a wrinkled photograph. It was the only thing she had left from her past life. The photo showed a smiling couple, her and Mick, standing in front of their grand mansion, a mansion she had once called home. Now, she was in a tiny one-bedroom apartment with a leaky ceiling, faded walls, and furniture that looked as if it had been discarded on the streets. No marble floors, no luxury chandeliers, no designer curtains or plush carpets beneath her feet, just cold, hard reality. Her hands trembled as she ran her fingers over Mick's face in the photo. The man who had once loved her more than anything, the man she had betrayed. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had done this to herself. She had been the wife of a millionaire. She had lived a life most women dreamed of. Expensive vacations, private jets, a wardrobe filled with designer clothes and jewelry that shimmered under golden lights. She never had to lift a finger. Mick had given her everything. His love, his trust, his world. And what had she done in return? She had thrown it all away. She still remembered the night everything collapsed. The candlelit dinner, Mick's calm yet piercing stare. The envelope filled with proof of her betrayal. Her heart had pounded in her chest as she opened it, her fingers shaking. And the moment her eyes landed on the photographs, her world shattered. Mick had known everything, every lie, every secret, every stolen moment she thought had gone unnoticed, and instead of exploding in anger, he had simply said, I already know everything. That was the moment she lost him, not just his love, but his respect. After Mick had left her, she had one person to turn to, the man she had risked everything for, Daniel. The younger, exciting man she had convinced herself was her future, the man she had thrown away her marriage for. She had called him that very night, her voice thick with desperation. "Daniel, I need help." A long pause, then a cold, detached voice. "I can't help you, Sophia." Her stomach twisted. "What?" "But you said you loved me." He sighed. "I loved the life we had. But that life's gone now, isn't it?" Tears spilled onto her cheeks. "Please, I have nowhere to go." His voice remained distant, almost bored. "That's not my problem." And then, click. The call ended. Sophia stared at her phone in disbelief, her entire body going cold. He had used her, just as she had used Mick. And now, she was alone. For the first time in her life, Sophia had to work. No more lazy mornings wrapped in silk robes, sipping imported coffee. No more extravagant shopping sprees, where she could spend thousands without a second thought. She had no money, no security, no one to rely on. So she did what she had never done before. She worked. She found a job at a small diner, wiping down tables and serving food to people who barely acknowledged her. Her feet ached. Her hands, once soft and delicate, grew calloused. Her pride shattered, but she had no choice. She had built her life on privilege, on the comfort of wealth she never had to earn. Now she was experiencing the real world, the struggles of people who didn't have millionaires to fall back on. And for the first time, she understood. While Sophia struggled, Mick thrived, not because he had moved on in anger, but because he had moved on with purpose. Instead of letting bitterness consume him, he chose to turn his pain into something greater. He donated millions to charities that helped people recover from betrayal and financial hardship. He set up organizations that gave second chances to those who had been left with nothing. He used his wealth not for revenge, but for change. And in doing so, he found peace. One evening, Mick visited one of his charities, a small soup kitchen he had funded. It was something he did often, not just as a donor, but as a volunteer. He walked in, greeting the staff, shaking hands with the people who had come for a warm meal. And then, his eyes landed on a familiar figure, a woman in a faded waitress uniform. Her once manicured hands were rough and tired, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. She was handing out plates, keeping her head down, avoiding eye contact with the people around her. Sophia. Mick's breath hitched, but he remained still. For a moment he simply watched. She had changed, not just in appearance, but in spirit. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement had vanished, and for the first time, she looked humble. Sophia turned, her eyes scanning the room. And then she saw him. Her entire body froze. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked at him the way a lost child looks at home, with longing, regret, and the crushing realization of everything she had lost. "Mick," she whispered. He simply held her gaze. Not with anger, not with pity, but with understanding. There was no reason to say anything. She already knew. She had lost him forever, and yet he gave her one final gift. A small nod, not of forgiveness, not of reconciliation, but of acknowledgement. Because he knew she had finally learned, she had suffered, she had fallen, she had changed, and that was enough. Mick turned to leave, stepping back into the cold night, but before he walked away, he whispered under his breath, "I hope you find peace, Sophia. I truly do." And with that, he was gone. Sophia, standing in the warmth of the soup kitchen, let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of understanding. She had been selfish, she had been blind, but now She was ready to change, and as she wiped her tears and turned back to the people she was serving, she made a silent vow to be better, to give back, to never take love, loyalty, or kindness for granted again. And in that moment she finally understood what Mick had meant all along. Revenge wasn't justice, growth was. Mick Jorden's story did not remain private. What had started as a personal battle turned into a national conversation. The moment the news broke about his incredible act of grace and justice, people couldn't stop talking. At first, the reactions were predictable. Some called him a fool for not seeking revenge. Others praised his wisdom. But soon, something unexpected happened. People didn't just see his story as entertainment, they saw it as a mirror to their own lives. Mick had chosen dignity over destruction, and that choice rippled through society in ways no one had anticipated. News outlets jumped on the story immediately. Millionaire betrayed by wife responds with unbelievable grace. Mick Jorden's justice, a lesson in strength, not revenge. A man scorned but not broken, how one act of kindness changed lives. Everywhere people turned, Mick's face was on their screens. His decision was discussed in boardrooms, cafes, classrooms, and even homes where families sat together, reading his story in awe. Some scoffed, unable to understand his strength. If it were me, I would have ruined her. He let her off too easy. How could he just walk away? But others saw the depth of his actions. This is the kind of world we need. He showed true power, the power of self-control. Maybe we should all rethink the way we react to betrayal. In a time when people glorified revenge, Mick had chosen justice instead. He had not fought fire with fire. He had not destroyed Sophia's life as she had done to him. Instead, he had given back. He had uplifted others who had suffered like him. And that choice forced people to rethink their own lives. In a small corner of the city, two strangers sat at separate tables in a coffee shop. A well-dressed businessman in an expensive suit scrolled through his phone, reading Mick's story. Across from him sat a young woman in simple clothes, sipping her coffee as she overheard him muttering to himself. "I don't get it," the businessman said aloud, shaking his head. "Why would he give away his money like that? Why didn't he make her suffer?" The young woman glanced up. "You think revenge would have made him feel better?" she asked. The businessman scoffed. "Of course!" She betrayed him. He should have destroyed her. The young woman studied him for a moment. "But he's the one smiling now, not her." The businessman hesitated. The young woman continued. "He didn't just lose his wife. He lost trust. He lost the future they planned together. But instead of becoming bitter, he built something better." The businessman frowned. "Still, I wouldn't have let her get away with it." She tilted her head. She didn't get away with anything. She lost him. She lost the love, the security, the world he gave her. And now, she has to live with that every single day. The businessman stared at his coffee. For the first time, he had no argument. The effect of Mick's story didn't stop with a few conversations. People across the country began questioning their own actions. How many times had they chosen anger over understanding? How often had they let hatred control them? How often had they judged others unfairly, whether because of betrayal, race, or social status? Mick's story reminded people that true power was not in vengeance, but in grace. Months after Mick's story had gone viral, he received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, and the handwriting was familiar. Sophia. Mick's breath caught in his throat as he unfolded the letter. It was short, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of regret. "Mick, I won't ask for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for showing me what true dignity looks like. Thank you for not destroying me, even when I destroyed you. Thank you for choosing justice, not hate. I've lost you forever, and I accept that. But I hope, one day, I can be even half the person you are." Sophia Mick closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, smiling to himself. Because he knew, and because of him, it had learned a lesson it would never forget. Mick's story was no longer about a millionaire and his unfaithful wife. It was about something much bigger. It was about breaking the cycle of hatred. It was about choosing love over revenge. It was about helping others rise even when you have been broken. And most importantly, it was about teaching the world that dignity, grace, and justice know no race, no wealth, and no status. A betrayal had led to a lesson. A lesson had led to a movement. And because of one man's choice, society would never be the same again. Mick eventually found love again, not with someone who admired his money, but with a woman who valued his heart. He continued his mission of kindness, proving that even in the face of betrayal, one could rise above and choose goodness. His story wasn't just about catching a cheating wife. It was about finding true strength in forgiveness and using pain to create a better world. Mick never thought he would find love again. For a long time, he avoided relationships, not because he was afraid of love, but because he had lost faith in it. Betrayal had left deep scars, ones that no amount of wealth could heal. But then he met Emily. She wasn't from his world of luxury. She didn't care about his money, his mansion, or his cars. She was a volunteer at one of the organizations Mick had donated to, the very charity he had built from his own pain. She admired him, not for his status, but for his heart. Emily had seen the worst of humanity in the people she helped. Abandoned families, broken lives, people left with nothing, yet she believed in redemption. In the first time they spoke, she told Mick something that stuck with him forever. "You turned pain into purpose. Not many people can do that." At first, Mick resisted getting too close. He was cautious, even fearful of being hurt again, but Emily was patient. She didn't rush him. Instead, she listened. She understood that some wounds don't heal overnight. Mick realized that not everyone was like Sophia. Not every person in his life would betray him, and most importantly, not every woman loved him for his money. Slowly, Emily became the light Mick didn't know he needed. She was kind, compassionate, and genuine. And for the first time in years, Mick felt something he thought he had lost forever. With Emily by his side, Mick's mission grew. He expanded his charitable foundation, reaching even more people in need. He met men and women who had faced betrayal just like he had. Some had lost everything, while others were struggling to move forward. Mick mentored them, helping them rebuild their lives just as he had done. One day, during a community event, a young man approached him. His name was Daniel. "I just wanted to say thank you," Daniel said, eyes filled with gratitude. "Your story, it changed my life. I was drowning in anger after my fiancé cheated on me, but when I heard what you did, I realized I didn't have to let revenge define me. I started over, and now I'm finally happy again." Mick smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Pain can break you, or it can shape you," Mick said. "You chose the right path." And in that moment he knew his pain had not been wasted. Meanwhile, Sophia was living a far different reality. She had thought she was trading up when she left Mick for her younger lover. But when he found out she no longer had access to Mick's wealth, he abandoned her without a second thought. For the first time in her life, Sophia had to work for everything she had. She struggled to pay rent, to afford the lifestyle she once took for granted. She applied for jobs, but with no real work experience, opportunities were scarce. The world she had once looked down upon was now her reality. One night, she sat alone in a tiny apartment, scrolling through her phone. She saw a news article about Mick's charitable work. There was a picture of him standing beside Emily, smiling as they handed out supplies to struggling families. Tears streamed down her face. She had lost everything, not just the money, but the love of a man who had once given her the world, and she had thrown it all away. She sent Mick a message. "I am so sorry." Mick read it, but he didn't respond. He didn't need to. Her regret was punishment enough. Mick's journey was no longer about a cheating wife or lost love. It was about something greater. He had proven that betrayal doesn't have to destroy you, that revenge is not the answer, that true strength lies in forgiveness, dignity, and grace. As he sat on his balcony one evening, watching the sun set over the city, Emily came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Mick took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of her embrace. "I'm thinking about how life doesn't always go the way we plan," he said, "but sometimes it leads us exactly where we're meant to be." Emily smiled. "And where are you meant to be?" Mick turned to her, his eyes filled with love and peace. "Right here." He had finally found his true happiness, not in wealth, not in status, but in love, kindness, and purpose. And in the end, the biggest lesson was clear. Love is not about wealth or appearances. It's about honesty, integrity, and respect, something that money can never buy.